Double-digit inflation persists for the second consecutive year. Oof. Yikes, that's not good. Consumer prices jumped 12.4%. Producer prices 11.7%. Cost for energy items rose. Oof. For the second consecutive year, the rate of inflation in both retail and primary markets registered double-digit increases. The CPI-U, was up 12.4%, falling at 13.3% advance the year before. Woo! Prices for all major consumer expenditure categories, except apparel and entertainment, increased by at least 10% over the year. Mortgage interest costs advanced 27% compared with the 34% decline the year before. Woof! Jeez Louise. Prices paid by consumers for energy items were up 18.1%. The finished goods price index climbed 11.7% in 1980, falling a 12.8% increase in 1979. Prices for most energy goods and services continued to rapidly rise in 1980. This is crazy. Check this out. Let's see. The prices for finished energy goods climbed 27% in 1980. After soaring 58% in 1979. This is from the Monthly Labor Review for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Price changes in 1980. Yeah, people just, I tell you, man, check this out. This is, in late 1979 and 1980, world crude petroleum prices rose sharply as the security of the Persian Gulf oil shipments was threatened by the revolution in Iran and Afghanistan. Consumer items, retail gasoline prices rose 18.9% in 1980, substantially less than the 52% surge in 1979. Profit margins were squeezed. Profit margins for retailers were squeezed as competition led to small price decreases during the second and third quarters. I thought inflation was all corporates making them money. Consumer prices for home heating oil moved up 20% over the year, which is only 1/3 as much as it did the previous year. Thankfully, demand was lighter than expected, largely due to the relatively mild winter. What? I thought global cooling was a thing in 1979 and 80. Who's reading this? This is published in April 1981. Falling a 13.6% advance in 1979, the CPI for services, which excluded energy, increased 14.1% in 1980. The advance in the contracted mortgage interest cost was responsible for nearly 1/5 of total CPI increase. The index for residential rent moved up 9% in 1980 compared to 7.9% in 1979, reflecting higher charges for heating, oil, gas, and electricity. The 17.2% increase for household services other than rent and energy reflected home purchase prices, which were up 11.4% in 1980 and 15.8% in 1979. Home purchase prices were up again, 11.4% in 1980, 15.8% in 1979. And mortgage interest rates were up 15% in 1980, 16.1% in 1979. The CPI for food increased 10.2%, the same as it did in 1979. At the producer price level, finished consumer food prices finished 7.3% in 1980, which is less than it was in 1979. Both the consumer and producer prices showed relatively little change during the first half of the year. However, in the third quarter, the CPI recorded its largest quarterly increase since 1973, and the PPI, Producer Price Index, its largest quarterly index increase since 1974. The sharp run-up was largely the result of severe summer drought, which helped prices for crude foodstuffs to soar 120%. 120% in the third quarter of 1980. At the same time, the increase in crude food prices pushed up producer prices of finished food products at an annual rate of 45%. Retail food prices consequently advanced 19.7% during the third quarter. Early in the year, live poultry and hog supplies are more than ample. In fact, pork production reached a new high. Competition from decreasing pork and poultry prices forced beef prices down, even though competition from decreasing pork and poultry prices also forced beef prices down? Basic economics. Substitution effect. Even though the cattle populations were near the low point of the production cycle, which had peaked in 1975. So even though the cattle population was the lowest it's been in 5 years, the fact that the prices for pork and poultry were going down brought down the prices of beef as well. It's called substitution effect. I'm not going to pay $15.99 a pound for this when I can pay $11.99 a pound for that. That's what happens to this. It starts going down. Anyway, I just thought that, in response to low prices in 1979, pig farmers already cut back on production plans for 1980. Meanwhile, hot summer weather damaged pastures and sent hay and manufactured animal feeds prices upwards, and annual weight gain slowed. Price to feed the cattle goes up, annual weight gain slows. That's kind of interesting. As a result, livestock supplies fell and prices soared during the third quarter. The hot weather also hit the poultry industry particularly hard as millions of chickens succumbed to the heat. However, the fourth quarter showed considerable price moderation. Milk prices rose 10% over the year, despite large supplies. What? Large supplies and prices rise, which was the result of the higher price supports. They used to have a saying like the price of milk was based on how far you away from, was a Wisconsin dairy farm or something like that. I don't even know if they still do that. It was crazy, man. And they would support you if you had just the whole thing, just the government get involved. Prices for sugar and sweets show the greatest increase of any food group. The 35.7% increase was the largest since 1974, when the index more than doubled. Artificial sweeteners jumped 96%. Retail sugar prices reached their highest level since January of 1975. And the producer price index for raw sugar was up 62%. Chocolate! I just saw chocolate now. I just can't find where I saw it here. Hold on a second. Right here. Cocoa beans. Let's see. Right here. Higher sugar prices and tight supplies allowed prices for corn syrup to soar 75%. However, prices for other confectionery materials failed to reflect that strong upward pressures. The declining per capita consumption in recent years and a third consecutive year of production surpluses set the price of cocoa beans down 34.6%, keeping the increase in chocolate coating and candy bars modest. Interesting. Poor sugar harvest in several major sugar-producing countries, especially Cuba and the Soviet Union produces sugar, led to a worldwide shortage. The situation was aggravated by increased demand in many developing countries. That's interesting. I wonder if that, going back to the higher sugar prices and tight supplies, allowed prices for corn syrup. I wonder if that's where we had the substitution of corn syrup with real sugar. High fructose corn syrup. Let's take a look when let's watch. Do something. Check this out. High fructose corn syrup was widely embraced by food formulators, and its use grew between the mid-70s and mid-90s, principally as a replacement for sucrose. This is primarily because the sweetness comparable with that of sucrose improves stability and function and ease of use. The sweetener is often compared to granulated sugar, but manufacturing advantage of high fructose corn syrup over sugar makes it cheaper. Interesting. Fructose corn syrup is among the sweeteners that mostly replace sucrose, table sugar. Factors contributing to the increase in food manufacturing include production quotas of domestic sugar. Huh. And that goes back to probably the Smoot-Hawley tariff bill, because Fred Smoot, if memory serves, was a senator from Utah, which had a major sugar producing thing. So they put quotas on that. It makes the cost higher, so they're going to find other sources as opposed to domestic sugar. Import tariffs, right there, man. Import tariffs and subsidies of U.S. corn, raising the price of sucrose and reducing that of high fructose corn syrup, creating a manufacturing cost advantage among sweetener applications. That's interesting. It provides advantages in food and beverage manufacturing, such as simplicity of formulation, stability, and enabling processing efficiencies. Gained popularity due to the rising prices of sucrose while selling for a third the price. About half of total production is in Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and India. U.S. high fructose corn syrup was widely used in food manufacturing from the 70s through the earliest 21st century, primarily as a replacement for sucrose because its sweetness was similar, improved manufacturing quality, and it was easier to use and cheaper, cheaper being the primary driver, of course. Domestic production increased from 2.2 million tons to 9.5 million tons in 20 years. More than 90% of sweeteners used in global manufacturing is sucrose, even though high fructose corn syrup is used about the same as sucrose in the United States. High fructose corn syrup is 76% carbohydrates and 24% water. Look at this. Carbohydrates, 76% of 100 grams. Since 2014, the U.S. FDA has determined that the high fructose corn syrup is safe. GRAS is generally regarded as safe as an ingredient for food and beverage manufacturing. And there's no evidence that products differ in safety from those containing alternative nutritive sweeteners. It's just amazing what prices and inflation will do to people's consumption habits. What happens with the price of goods here. Substitution effects and all this. Economics is amazing, man. It really is. You're like, dude, you start having wars, and all of a sudden you got more high fructose corn syrup, and I'm just using that for example. What a war over here, what does it affect over there? And you start raising or lowering tariffs, or you start mandating high minimum wages. I mean, this is real stuff. But with that said, the inflation that we had in the 1980s, we're not near that right now. It's just in 1979 and 80s, anywhere stretch of the imagination. It's worse than it's been a couple of years ago, but this is why I did a video. So glad I was born in the 1970s, because I realized how bad things can get. And I wasn't born into the Great Depression, but I was born in the 70s. And the idea of the idea of what we have now compared to what we had then is, and people say it's worse. It's worse now than it was then. Yeah, crazy. All right, God bless. Love your thoughts.